Higher education views timely degree attainment and discipline-based mastery as components of student success. How do you define student success, or to frame it another way, what does a successful, I'll say UNC graduate look like?
I actually sit in a strange position at UNC General Administration, which is really as the principal interface with the business community for our system, but also as someone who sits in academic affairs within UNC General Administration. So I sort of have two different ways of seeing it, and in many ways that question I think has been defined throughout the entire day. So I wrote down Craig Horn's answer, which is readiness to participate in life and adapt to the future, which I thought was really good. And Adrienne Cole said, businesses see success as workers who are not only successful today, but can be successful in the future. And my answer would be somewhat simpler than both of those, and that is that a successful student is someone who looks like this. Apologies to my UNC Chapel Hill people on the panel. I know that symbol is a little raw still. But I think a successful student is somebody who is both deep and broad, so has that depth in a particular major or degree program, but is also broad across a number of areas. And that's really what our faculty has been trying to work on for the past few years is how do you get somebody who really knows their stuff in a major, but also what are the general education courses that someone has to take so that when they go into life or work, they can be the kind of person who is a problem solver. I was talking to Representative Barefoot yesterday, and he said, that's what I need from the UNC system, is people who come out and are problem solvers. And I think that's a pretty good definition, is somebody who can come into any situation, whether it's in their civic life or in their work life, and be the kind of person that is able to provide solutions, not just based on what they know, the technical stuff that they've learned, but the ability to apply that and the habits of mind that they've learned while they're with us to be able to solve real problems in the world.
And to follow up on that, you can teach through the book, you can teach common sense, insight, how to think, how to approach problems. How do you see this, how do you see that working at the UNC system? Because you can study chemistry, you can study data, you can study, that's cold hard facts. The soft skills, is the university positioned to get students successfully out there in the real world with that side of their education?
I think, in my opinion, the best way is something that several people have brought up today as well. And we heard it from UNCG talking about their Export Odyssey program. David Lauda from UT Austin talked about their internship programs. We've heard some of those others. And I really believe that that opportunity that people have to apply while they are with us is really important. Right now, about 55% of our graduates do something in their major that is applied in nature, some sort of internship or practicum or apprenticeship or applied learning experience while they're with us. And to me, that's where you really get that blend. And what happens during an internship is somebody comes back from one of those and they do better in the classroom. And after graduation, somebody comes back from those and they are more attractive to people who are considering hiring them. So finding that way of blending the classroom experience and the chance to apply that in an applied setting is a really great opportunity for students, and it makes them more attractive not only to potential employers, but also to people who want them to serve on boards or help them in the community if they've had that chance to blend those two things.
For this panel, the panelists will be asked the same question, so you'll get the same question, you'll hear their perspectives in terms of a different answer to that question. To you, Mr. Mattson, from your perspective running the graduate school at UNC Chapel Hill, what does a successful student look like from your experience?
So I am going to address this from the point of view of a faculty member who's looking for a student to admit to graduate school. And Leslie has really articulated many of the things that we look for. But let me add just a little bit. First of all, we're not looking for people with just book smarts. There are plenty of very, very smart students out there, students who have tremendous GPAs, who have wonderful GRE scores, who are not what we're looking for in graduate school, who are not going to succeed in graduate school. It's that other piece of the equation that we're looking for. You know, I would love to say that we know exactly what we're looking for and we know how to find it, but we don't. This is probably the most difficult aspect of graduate admissions for us to wrap our arms around. How do we find those individuals who are deeply committed to continuing study in that discipline that they've chosen as their own? How do we find those individuals who have the resilience to succeed in graduate school? Graduate school is not easy for anybody. And so we're looking for students who somehow have demonstrated that grit or that resilience. I just don't know better words for it than that. We're looking for people who can think very deeply, who are problem solvers. We're also looking for individuals who are able to both work independently and collaboratively. And I know those two things sound like they're at odds with one another, but they're both going to be required for a student ultimately to succeed in graduate school. They're going to have to be able to work in both of those spheres. So I was looking at a paper as I was preparing for this session, and the individual who wrote this paper referred to something that he called holistic development as something that needs to occur during an undergraduate education. And he lumps a lot of things together, which I want to share with you because I think they capture what we're looking for outside of the book smarts. Intellectual development, learning how to learn, emotional development, skills to understand and control emotions, social development, those social skills, that ability to work with other people, ethical development, evidence of good character and a real moral compass, physical development, an ability to stay well and stay at your peak as you perform in graduate school, and ultimately something he referred to as spiritual development, that search for personal meaning. You don't come to graduate school because you want to make a lot of money. You come to graduate school because you're really deeply committed to what it is you intend to do in graduate school, deeply committed to further study within an area. So that gives you a sense of what we're looking for. It's very hard to measure it.
Ms. Haas, I'll let you answer this question on behalf of UNC students, all of them. How about that?
A lot of students.
Pull the microphone up close. It's one thing for the academic class to define student success on behalf of students. You are a student. How do you define success? And when you see another student being successful, how do you define that?
Right. I think whenever I think about success, especially looking at my peers and assessing myself and where I'm going to take this next step in life, the number one thing that comes to mind is passion. And I think that an institution needs to offer a wide variety of opportunities for students to find what that passion may be. For me, I'll kind of give some background. I'm really passionate about the hospitality and restaurant industry. So whenever I came to Appalachian, that's what I wanted to do. But some of the opportunities that were presented to me were to learn more about entrepreneurship. And so that's another passion that was developed. And kind of what was just spoken about, being a holistic graduate, someone who is very self-aware of aspects, not just intellectual, but emotional, ethical. And I think the way to do that is for a student to be very multifaceted. One thing with me is I'm in the business school, but I don't want all of my experiences to happen in the business school because that's going to keep me in a very narrow, margin of people and thought. And so one of the things, especially at Appalachian, is they encourage us to get involved across campus. So I'm on the student conduct board. I run my own business on campus, and I just started my own startup company, which is getting me more involved in the community of Boone. And so all of these different areas are exposing me to more people, more thought processes of the people I'm interacting with. And so I think that's a really key aspect of success in regards to the fact that I'm not just focusing on one area, but there's all these other aspects. And then another thing that I really wanted to focus on too is failure. I think that one of the greatest things that has helped me be the person that I am and taking this next step are the opportunities that I've had at Appalachian, but then the faculty and staff who've let me fail, but let me learn from those failures. Because it's easy to hold someone's hand in situations and to make sure that they don't fail, which is basically success. But in the other end, to really be successful, you need to learn from those failures. So I think a component is making sure that you're ensuring these students are successful, but you're not doing it to the extent that you're taking away from what they can learn and grow through those different failures and gain those critical thinking skills and the ability to communicate. Because in the times of failure are when that growth can really happen, and you can translate and you can be flexible and adaptable whenever you're going into these environments post-graduation. And when I assess my peers in particular, for me, I'll give some background again. My dad is a first-generation college student, and he's worked for 4 different degrees. And so when I was coming into college, he wanted me to go to law school, and that was like what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to be a lawyer. And then I tell him I want to work in the restaurant industry for the rest of my life. He wasn't very happy about that. But in my experience at Appalachian, the students who I see as most successful are the ones who have internally thought through what they want to do, and they're willing to fight the system of what we think we're supposed to do and take those opportunities. One of the people I look up to most is going into the Peace Corps, where you're not going to make that much money, but the impact you're going to make is incredible, and they're taking that passion and translating it. And so I think that's a core thing where you're willing to go against the grain of what everyone else thinks you're supposed to do. And like my dad, and that's the person I respect most in this world, I need to be able to say, Dad, this is what I want to do, and be confident in that. And that's a form of success for myself, to be able to be confident in what I want to do in life. Sorry.
Well, Dr. Shufford, you deal with students and success, and we're here to accentuate the positive. When you see a successful student out there at UNC Chapel Hill, what qualities do you see in the process and their journey across that campus through those years?
Well, like the students and other panelists have said, is that at Chapel Hill, we actually, as an institution looking at the undergraduate students, really asked the question, how do we define student success at Chapel Hill for our undergraduate students? So we went through a process of looking at what's in the literature, and much of that has been discussed earlier today with some of the other panelists as well, in terms of it is holistic. It does capture psychosocial development. It does look at individual differences of students in terms of looking at success. We sent out a survey under the leadership of Dr. Cynthia Demetrio, who's in the audience with the Office of Undergraduate Retention. Got feedback from faculty, staff, and students on what success should look like for students. And of course, there are many dimensions of what people had to share. But we finally came up with a very holistic definition that starts with the premise that all students can thrive at the institution, and that we all have a responsibility for student success. So students have the responsibility for doing their work, and we have an excellent example of the student who's already talked about what she's done at her campus, and that the institution needs to provide the conditions for success. And as faculty and staff, there are things that we need to do in being able to be competent to be able to assist our students in being successful. So some of the things that we came up with in terms of, we believe that students' success includes exploring and growing intellectually, appreciating diversity and diverse perspectives, as well as developing their own identity, developing social and emotional skills, engaging in meaningful activities, roles, and responsibilities, and cultivating a sense of purpose and vocation. So that's the premise that we think that students should do in terms of being successful. And then from the institutional side, providing an environment that allows students to be able to advocate for themselves and to be resilient. The speaker at lunch talked about the growth mindset, is ensuring that we don't look at students as being fixed in their intellectual ability, that the things that we can do to assist them, that they can grow and develop in areas. That we provide an environment that affirms cultural identities and advances inclusive excellence, that we encourage academic excellence, integrity, and leadership, and demonstrates concern for the well-being of the whole student, so really looking holistically at the student. We also believe that not every student can take the same pathway to success. based on the student's experience and background, their success may look different from another student. And so there's also individual differences in how we look at success. And then we certainly believe that when students take the full advantages that all the universities have to offer, that they can be successful.
Thank you very much. Ms. Clark Sellers, Innovation Officer. That would intimidate me as a new college graduate talking to you, but so you deal with the young graduate. They're no longer a successful student, they are an entry-level professional. So what's the difference there, and how do you take success on campus and make it real-world success?
Well, if we could have a student that addressed all of the comments that were just made, that'd be perfect, right? That's a perfect world. So I guess, when we look at students coming out of universities, there's a certain amount of baselining that we look at. That baselining is what is the degree, what is the GPA, all right? So that's kind of to get in the door. So once they get in the door, now things become different. So now you've got to differentiate yourself. And some of the key areas, of course, are internships. Any type of practical, applied knowledge of what they've learned certainly starts to raise a person above the others. Some of the other attributes that we look for, and one that I find interesting, is how much community involvement have they had during their tenure in the university. They've been in a location for at least 4 years. Have they ventured into the community? Do they know what the area is about? How do they get involved in the community? I see very little of that in most graduates. For me, what that is an indicator of is the ability to network. And the ability to network is critical. As you're coming into a company, you've got to be able to create an infrastructure to make you successful. And that is not done by a single person. It's done by a group of people. So being able to reach out within a company, create that network that will help you be successful. Reach outside the company. Be able to go outside your comfort zone. So those students that go to school, that do well in school, but they don't venture outside, that to me I question. Do they really have the personality that will allow them to be successful in an area that I constantly push the limits on? That the only way you're successful is you've got to find out what else is out there. And so involvement in community, involvement on the university are two key ways that I look at students to look at. Are they going to be a fit? Are they going to give me the creative thinking abilities? Are they going to give me the different approaches that I need in my company to continue to be innovative and to be successful?
To follow up on that, community involvement, and some people have to work and go to school before they get their degree. There's a difference in being a community servant and having to work a part-time job. Do you view those differently when you look at a student who's earned their way up, but they've had to pay their way through?
It depends on what that work is. So what did they do with that work? Was it simply a task? I go in and I do this work and I check off my task and I'm done? Or do they actually make that work something that they've done more with? That, okay, I went in as a salesperson. I'm doing retail sales. Well, what else did you do there other than checking people out? Did you do something that made your job a little bit different, a little bit special? I absolutely would look at that favorably, but not just someone who goes in and says, okay, I did A through Z because that's on my job description, and that's what I got paid per hour to do. So I'm not necessarily looking for someone who can check off task and perform task, but how do you do it a little differently? I was asked to come in and check out people. Well, hey, I found out a really neat way I could do this. I could show them some different things in my mobile app. I could show them some different ways of looking at it. That's what makes that work a little bit more special.
Mr. Boney, to add some controversy to this panel, the person hiring says, I need to see some real-world activity and some leadership. Others on the panel say, and the university, hey, we want to create a holistic environment that develops those intangible skills you can't put your finger on. So to follow up the next question, how do you tangibly measure the student's success? How do you know that the metrics are matching the private sector? And specifically, what are the dispositions and the competencies of students who you would say are absolutely prepared to attend graduate professional school, go into the workforce, or to contribute and innovate in society? Already questioned, but
Yes, and following this answer, I'll solve world hunger.
go ahead.
Let me just mention a couple of things. We do regular outreach to the business community and ask them about what competencies they're looking for. And I think many of these transfer over to graduate schools as well. But curiously, you know, there's a lot of complaint about talent shortage. And as you look at that and really drill down on that, we found very few businesses were actually concerned about our graduates' ability to do the things that they majored in. In terms of being competent in engineering, our engineers know engineering. But where they tell us that we need to do better, and where a lot of the people who've been working here today have really excelled, is in the areas of working in teams, figuring out ways to give them experiences so that they work in teams, show some form of independence on their own, an ability to carry out a project on their own, as Steve said, an ability to work in teams. Georgia Tech, one of the criteria they use for their engineering grad students is whether someone has demonstrated proficiency in an instrument, which sounds like the strangest thing you could possibly look at engineering students for. But what they find is that shows an ability to work independently. It shows an ability to work in teams with other people, and it's a proxy for a habit of mind that's pretty important. Other big things that our faculty has been working on a lot, particularly in the gen ed curriculum, general education curriculum, is ability to improve written and oral communications. So if you get those sorts of things, as Lee said, you absolutely have to have a GPA that registers on the pulse, and I think Steve would agree with that. You've got to have people who are clearly competent in their major, but after that, you're starting to look for people who have the spark that Emily talked about, who have gone out and done something, who have taken an idea and refined it, who have really learned to look people in the eye and convince them of an idea that means something, who can write clearly about what it is and have shown they can work on teams. And if we've done that, then we've got somebody who fits the criteria for the grad school, who fits the criteria for the workplace, and who fits the criteria for future legislators or community leaders. So I think we can thread that needle, and if we do that, then we've been successful.
Passing the microphone over to Dean Mattson. Dispositions and competencies. I think competencies can be trained. Disposition a little more subjective, maybe a little more risky to discuss, but there are qualities you look for in a graduate student that tell you this person has it and this person could have it. How do you balance out to know who's ready?
Well, I love my colleague's comment with regard to passion and almost an impossible thing to measure. Let me talk first about the things we can measure and then get to that. So, you know, as most graduate schools, we require a GPA of some kind. All graduate students have to have a bachelor's degree to come in. There are no situations in which we admit a student to graduate school without a bachelor's degree, unlike what may happen in industry at some times. They've also got to take a GRE and have at least a reasonable score on the GRE exam. That's not a predictor of success in graduate school, never intended to be a predictor of success in graduate school, as some people may think it is. What it does a reasonable job of doing is predicting whether or not they're going to get through the first year, which is mainly focused on classes. So it's the rest of graduate school that becomes important. And we are looking for those students with passion for what it is that they're doing. So where do we find that information? The best indicators we have at this point in time are what come in either letters of recommendation from faculty or other individuals at the university that the student knows well, or in the student's own letter of interest or statement of interest for graduate school. And within that statement of interest, we're really looking for that passion, that commitment to further study. In those letters of recommendation, we're looking for evidence that the student has, in fact, carried out some sort of project on their own, has the persistence and the grit to potentially succeed in graduate school, can work both independently and collaboratively. The other key thing most of us are looking for, and this is particularly true for doctoral programs, and it's really important that students have and take advantage of an opportunity to engage in research of whatever kind at the undergraduate level. We're moving more and more into a climate where that is a key measure of the potential for success in graduate school. And the students who can demonstrate some level of engagement with research have a much better chance of getting into graduate school. And those are sort of the people we're looking for that we think will have what it takes, even if it's not entirely demonstrated in the rest of that record.
Ms. Patel, you'll answer this particular question. It's probably not a fair question to ask you about graduate school just yet and how you can assess successful graduate students. However, as a senior, you know how you feel. Are you ready? Do you feel like the university has prepared you so that you're actually feeling confident deep down, no matter the butterflies of graduating from the university and entering the real world? How's it going for you as you conclude your career? What are your expectations, and how prepared do you think you are?
Well, currently I am applying to graduate schools and I'm waiting to hear back. But when it comes to measuring student success, I honestly believe that you can't. There are just so many different aspects to it. Sure, you can look at GPA and retention rates and all this other data that we've been talking about all day. But from a student's perspective, a success for them could be getting out of bed in the morning when they've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning doing homework. There are those little successes that, as a student who deals with panic attacks, and I've been up half the night dealing with that, calming myself down enough to sleep, getting up for my 8 a.m., that's a struggle that a lot of students have to deal with, and you can't measure that numerically at all. And I'm a stats major, like all I deal with is numbers, but it's just one of the things that you can't measure unless you talk with these students. So for me, measuring success is how much you've grown as a student as well, where I went from someone who did not want to come back after her freshman year to someone who is now graduating in May and hopefully going to graduate school for public health. So that's just how I would personally measure success. And then being prepared to enter the workforce, it all goes back to adaptability. Are you going to be that strong head that is not going to listen to anybody else's opinion, or are you going to take in what other people are saying and go back to your own opinions and be like, yeah, I can see where they're coming from. I have my own opinions, they have theirs, but let's try to work together. And that is what it means to me to enter that successful workforce or graduate school and have those passions, like Emily said. Because if you're not able to do something that you love to do, are you really being that successful?
Let me follow up with you. That may be the most important question I asked because this whole day has been about student success. What happened after your freshman year that flipped your opinion from wanting to quit university or not go back to now poised to apply for graduate school and off you go?
So at the end of my freshman year, my roommate actually died by suicide. And so that was right at the end of April. So I went home for the weekend, took that time with my family, and they're like, you need to go back and stuff. And going back to that, I would go into a room where the other bed is empty, where all of her stuff is gone. So it was just me. And so what really helped me stay there was the faculty and staff that we have at App State's campus. I had our area coordinator come and meet with me every single day just to check in to see how I was doing. And then from there on, once a week, and I still keep in contact with her. She sees me in the hallways and asks, how are you doing? Like, how are your classes going? How is your mental health? Those things are so important to me. And then I was also able to meet with our Dean of Students and propose a Suicide Remembrance Night, which is now in its 3rd year and has been recognized by the New York Times. So being able to go from that to now, it's just amazing.
Dr. Schaffert. Appalachian State, smaller campus, Chapel Hill, NC State, big campus. The personal touch turned her around. When it comes to those dispositions and competencies and all the things life throws at a student, how can you sort through the challenges they face in the real world setting? How do you stare down those problems and make sure they stay in school? And how do you know that they're ready for grad school when they get there or to go to work? Just like she said, she turned it around. It was all on a journey with her advisors.
Well, in student affairs, that's the very thing that we try to do is we work with students in the co-curricular, so they spend a lot of time outside of the classroom, living in the residence halls, participating in student organizations, working as student employees. On our campus, we have about 4,000 students who are employed within student affairs. We have over 600 student organizations where students get involved and develop leadership skills. So our focus in student affairs is on competency development. So we've identified a set of 11 core competencies based on best practices, what employees have indicated that they think is important for students as they go into the world of work. And so that as we work with students in our various programs and services, we're all working collectively in every department to help students to be able to achieve these core competencies no matter what touch point they have within student affairs and the institution, that we're all working towards those same goals. And so with every touch point, students hopefully are scaffolding their learning. So whether they're working with an advisor in career services on how to develop a resume or conduct an interview, or they're working as an RA in our housing and residential education area, is that they're exposed to these core competencies. And that's, as a division of student affairs, then we're trying to assess that learning around those core competencies. So we've had this initiative that we're working with is called Excellence in Action. So it includes the development of the core competencies, looking at technology tools that we can use to help track student involvement and engagement through developing a co-curricular transcript or involvement record, being able to create a dashboard where students can see how they're achieving or exposed to the various competencies through our various programs and services that we offer. And then we want to be able to add a sort of a mentoring and advising component to help students get directed into programs and activities where students can achieve those core competencies. So we've, it took us about a year to actually map the competencies to all the programs and services that we offer so that we could actually see, have a record where if a student is an RA, then these are the core competencies that we're providing support for those students to be able to achieve. So if they're in another area, then they may have another set of core competencies that they're working with. And then collectively, hopefully that students will be able to achieve in those areas.
Ms. Clark-Sellers, on a job interview, there's so many questions you can't ask someone, and a story like that, you may or may not ever hear it. So maybe you have a student that has literally moved a mountain in their personal life. GPA took a hit because something happened that was really disruptive. But you look at GPA, and you look at actual tangible skills. How do you balance that when you're sizing up your new college applicant, their disposition, which I assume to be personality driven, and then you compare to the competencies, but you may not know what they've been through to get the 3.3 as opposed to the 3.9.
Yeah, so it's a good point, and I think it gets back into, coaching students. How do you go into interviews? I think that, there's always open-ended questions asked during interviews. Have you done something that really took a lot of effort? Have you done something that you're really proud of, or have you done something that you didn't do a very good job at, and what did you learn from? So the comment on failure for me is as important as successes are. And so we provide open-ended questions for the candidates to answer. So it's really up to them as to how do they articulate themselves. The ability to communicate those items are critical, and that is, it gets into the soft skills that we've all talked about, but the articulation skills, the body posture, that goes a very long way in an interview. So take opportunities when you're asked open-ended questions to provide that feedback that your employer probably cannot legally ask, but you want to share. So that, I think, is the opportunity that students have to provide that information that could make those hiring decisions.
I don't even know all the rules for when you're career counseling on the campus level. Is it wise to identify your weaknesses, to explain, I could have been this, I had the car accident, I got cancer, I got something. How is that viewed in the job, in the applicant pool when you're weighing out people, and all you want to hear is how they're going to help your company in the bottom line?
Yeah, so that's usually not the intent of the interview, to know
Of
how
course
they're
not.
going to help us to the bottom line.
Well,
Right.
but,
But the interview is really for us to get to know the candidate.
okay.
And our process is such that, you have to get through the door, right? And as again, the door is that GPA, and do you have some applied learnings? Whether that is you worked or that you did internships, however that may be. Beyond that, depending on their responses and how they reacted. So if they had a negative, difficult personal situation, how they reacted to it, that makes all the difference in the world. Did they react to it? I had to take a few years off from college, get myself back together, then I came back in, or I was able to do this, continue through school. So it really depends on what their response was to that activity or to that incident. Makes the difference. It's very difficult because every student, luckily we're able to get students that actually are very free-flowing with their information, sometimes a little bit more than we'd like to know. So usually we have the opposite issue is, okay, let's be succinct too with the stories, but it's important to be able to articulate those activities and how they have enhanced the person, how the person has grown as a result of that.
Mr. Boney, the next question, and the generic question is what gets students to the point that they are prepared to pursue graduate studies or work. However, earlier this morning, something I should have thought of this and I didn't. You have the 18-year-old at 22 gets the degree the way the traditional path is. Got a lot of U.S. military veterans coming back, late 20s to mid-30s. Middle-aged folks like me need to start over. Older folks who say, I want to go get it, I never got a chance. Take one of those and tell me, how do you know that person is at the point they're ready for graduate school, they're ready for their new career, or they're ready just to knock one check off their bucket list and call it a success in their life?
Well, let me talk about a student that we never talk about, that we serve a lot, but we just don't talk about a whole lot, and that is the student that is coming back after having been hit in the solar plexus with a layoff. So we're talking about, and there are more and more of these students that we see. Some of them come in as traditional full-time equivalent students. Others come to visit us via continuing ed. So they're looking to tweak a skill. They've been working for a manufacturing company. They've been working in a job that has obsoleted itself, and they need a tweak. And they need some different kind of intervention. And those sort of people, when they come in through continuing ed, there's little difficulty getting admitted. But whether they succeed or not is going to be based on how they react to what just happened to them. So if we can get someone into continuing ed, then we have an opportunity to help them, and the admissions requirements are not as high. And what determines their success is whether or not they've been able to pull themselves up from what just happened to them. So that's an important cohort that increasingly I think universities are going to have to be more intentional about. And we do a pretty good job with a lot of those people right now. In terms of the success that someone might have who comes back later in life for a full-time degree program, we're doing a lot of work right now on finding ways to give them credit for prior learning. How do we assess what they've already learned so that when we come back, we don't say, okay, we realize you've had 20 years in the military and you've learned the following things, but we can't really figure out how those map to any courses that we have, so you need to start over again. I think as we continue to work on that as a system and as individual institutions, then that's going to go a long way toward helping people. If we can figure out a way to really recognize what they've already learned so that we can then begin teaching them the things that they still need to learn in order to have that degree.
You'll pass the microphone. The next question will be to Mr. Madsen. I want to follow up on that. The graduate applicant at 22 versus the one at 32 that's out of the military. 42 got laid off and 62, let's make it 72. We've worked for 40 years of our life and we want to have fun. How do you handle each of those? How do you look at those individual people and go, that person is ready for where they are in their life to take on the challenges that you are going to offer them if you allow them on your campus?
It's really based on the experiences they've had and what they tell us about their desire to come back to graduate school. I mean, I think it's really that simple. It's going to be a personal statement, their willingness to take a look at what's necessary in graduate school, but tell us stories about what they have done to get to that point and what has made them want to come back. If those stories are compelling enough, we have plenty of those students. I took a recent look at the demographics of the graduate students that we're currently serving. And I was, I guess, a little surprised to discover that the youngest graduate student we currently have is 18. The oldest graduate student we currently have is 71. And so we are, at this point in time, serving each and every one of those categories of students. And it's really about, why do you want to come back? What are you bringing back to us that will enhance the programs we have? What can we give you that will enhance your future career?
Ms. Haas, are you going to graduate school, Ms. Haas, or are you going to go out and make some money, or try to make your career?
Well, I'm actually going into a fellowship program.
Okay.
But I did apply to grad school. I kind of actually, all the three that were part of that question, I had applied to all three. One related to innovation, which is the fellowship. One to the workforce, which was like the Ritz-Carlton and MGM. And then the other, which was grad school with Cornell.
And
So
you're
I'm
running
kinda-
your business. So pick one. I'll tell you which one to pick. Which one do you feel most ready for? If you had to pick one right now and you could control whether you got in or not, which way do you go? Where do you feel most confident?
Right. So the one I'm actually going with, it's called Venture for America. So it's an entrepreneurial fellowship. So I'll go to Brown this summer for a training program, training camp they call it, and then you do a 2-year rotation with a startup company. And the idea is these startup companies are located in low economic areas around the United States, so like Detroit, New Orleans, Baltimore. And the idea is to change this pipeline of students where most of your high-performing college grads go to work for these top-of-the-line law firms and investment banks. And they make a lot of money, but are they really contributing to our economic development? And so the idea is Venture is to change the pipeline and to put these students into these startup companies in these low economic areas to drive economic development and to create jobs. And so I feel that I'm most capable, I guess, or ready for this opportunity because of 2 reasons that are specifically offered to me at Appalachian. One of them is related to autonomy. Since I've been a part of different student organizations on campus, Appalachian has given me the ability to mold these organizations. I feel like a lot of times, I'm sure Kira can agree with this, I feel like we're put in these boxes and we're told to be this certain way and to do something in these, this way or whatever. But what I really have appreciated with my opportunities at App is I've been able to run my own business. So I run this store called Bootstraps, and I've managed 33 student employees, 27 vendors, and a 5-member exec board. And the whole idea here is that is something that I've been over. My advisor doesn't get involved with it. I've managed this entire store. And the skills and abilities that I've been able to learn through that opportunity are incredible. That's completely different than something that's compared to what I'm learning in the classroom. I feel like they have to go hand in hand. But a second component to that, which I feel like people have talked a lot about today, are mentorships. And I feel like the word mentor is thrown around a lot, but I don't think people realize the value of being a mentor. For instance, I applied for an internship this past summer in Las Vegas, and I had my first ever Skype interview ever. My mentor spent 3 hours. We were in 2 offices right next to each other. I was on one computer and he was on another computer, and we practiced questions for 3 hours so I could get comfortable in how to communicate through a computer. And that was just one opportunity, but this opportunity with Venture, I chose this over Cornell and over a job with the Ritz-Carlton. The reason I say that, but the reason I say that is I feel like that's a hard decision for a 22-year-old to make, because I feel like this next step out of life is, in a lot of ways, we feel all this pressure to be able to decide this path that we're going to lead for all these years. But the idea is this mentor has helped me kind of figure out that I have to follow my passion and my heart, and at the end of the day, that's going to be what matters. And so for me, taking this path and whatever path, I would say having the ability to mold what I've been able to be a part of and really gain firsthand experience has been vital. And then a second thing is those mentorships. And when I say that, any one person can be a mentor. It doesn't take a team of 50 people to mentor a student. It can be a housekeeper. It can be somebody who's just walking around campus and sees somebody who's having a bad day and takes the time to talk to them. A relationship can be developed there. And that's how you make a difference when students, just taking your time to talk with them and make that connection.
Dr. Shefford, you have a different approach as a student affairs expert. You have to pick the student up somewhere earlier in their journey and hope that well, you don't hope, you work to get them prepared so they're at the point they're ready to go to work or ready to go to graduate school. How early do you start thinking about that for the students that pop up on your radar? Do you do it as freshmen, sophomores? Do you wait till they get more seriously dialed in on the major their junior year? How does it work?
Thank you. Well, it is a developmental process, because we have students, like our students on the panel, probably would be successful no matter what we do or whatever interventions we have. But not every student falls in that category. Some students need extra assistance, encouragement, support. Someone talked earlier on one of the earlier panels about challenge and support. So we try to do that in the first year. We have a first-year experience program in our residence halls where they provide a variety of different workshops and presentations from a variety of different offices, helping students to make the transition and be able to get engaged on campus. So that's going to be very critical. Opportunities for students to get involved in student organizations so they can develop leadership skills, be able to apply their learning from the classroom, apply what they've learned in other avenues on campus in the co-curricular. And one of the goals that we want to do in student affairs is really look at integrated learning experiences so that students don't look at all of their involvement as a series of silos, that they begin to integrate what they're learning in class with what they do outside of the classroom, integrate their learning from one leadership opportunity to the next so that they're making those connections. You talked about articulation of things that they've learned. You know, that's one of the things that we want to do is not just to say I was a leader of a student group or I was a part of this organization, but what skills did you learn that you can take with you throughout your lifetime? So that really starts at the beginning as a first-year student on through their senior year.
How risky is it for the student that has the perfect 4.0 at university, but all they've done is sat in a book for those 4 years? They don't have anything else, but nobody's going to beat them for what they've done on campus. How risky of a student strategy is that? Is that a disastrous path to go on or just an ill-advisement? Because I'm hearing everything about involvement, real-world participation, and the academics.
Certainly the academics is very important, but we've heard from various panelists throughout the day is that employers are looking for people who have a holistic background and experience. You know, the panelists earlier talked about, you know, when you look at students going to graduate and professional school, they look at other things other than just GPA or test scores. And so one of the things with the Excellence in Action initiative, that's why we're trying to look at every student that comes to the university and find their niche within the institution where they can engage. It might be in an organization related to their discipline or the major, or maybe in other activities, but finding some niche within the institution, giving that support, that advising, that mentoring to help students get engaged and connected.
I want to build on that, Ms. Clarcella. I'm trying to formulate this question well. Student goes through and you sit down with them and talk to them. Can you distinguish, or how well can you distinguish that person and go, you know what, I believe, you may not know for sure, I have an innovator on my hands, I have an entrepreneur on my hands, I have a widget maker on my hands, a good engineer on my hands, or I have someone who would probably be better in graduate school to come back with more training and exercise on the academic side. How do you balance all that? Do you apply those kind of labels when you try to find that perfect team fit?
You do, and often, I mean, what you do is there are various roles that you have to fill. So it depends on what are the characteristics of that role. What does that role need? Is this role a primary researcher where GPA tends to take more precedence? Or is this going to be an engineer that works in a team? Or is this going to be a marketing person that I'm looking for to develop an entire new go-to-market strategy for a new product? So it depends on the position that's being hired for and what that position needs, because there's usually already somewhat of associated team put together. So what's the missing element in that team? So one of the things that we're careful with is trying to make sure we have enough diversity of skills in the group. So we don't try to hire for the same skill repeated after each other, but we need to have that difference of individuals And so if I already have a lot of widget makers in the team, I'm probably not going to look for another widget maker.
Can students realistically know that they may be the perfect or the ill fit for a particular team? If they're at the point that they are ready for the right job, is it even possible for a student to have that awareness of what you need, or is that one of those poker hands you just keep to your vest, and even if the best candidate comes through, an ill fit is an ill fit?
Yeah, so one of the things that we try to do is not to waste the candidate's time, nor waste our time. You know, one of the challenges when we put out a job is that there are many, many, many applicants. There could be hundreds of applicants for a single job. So we try to make sure the job is described well enough so that people can also do self-selection. Do they feel they are a good fit? Do they feel they're not a good fit? If they feel they are a good fit, come with the passion, tell me why you're a good fit. So a lot of that responsibility, I think, is up to the industry. So the industry needs to make sure that we define what we're looking for well enough, that we don't just put down the technical skills, but as well the soft skills. What are we looking for explicitly? And to try to do that as best we can. So I look at that as, you know, part of the definition of our success. How are we going to be able to select the best student?
And we'll go to our final question. Will be open-ended, Leslie Boney. It's the final parting opinions. What have you heard today? How do we best summarize? And everyone will get a shot at answering this question. Give us your vision. Student success, getting our students ready, and hopefully helping North Carolina's economy because of it.
My one-sentence summary of today would be that personal relationships on campus are the key to student success. Finding some way to connect with some real person, to find there's somebody else that has your back, that is looking out for you. Now, beyond that, we've heard from people on this panel, I think, that we need to give students support to succeed. We need to give them an opportunity to lead and to fail so that they can graduate and become citizen problem solvers.
To Mr. Mattson, your thoughts or ideas, maybe something we overlooked in this discussion?
You know, there's no single perfect indicator of that student who has succeeded at the undergraduate level and then will succeed in graduate school. If there were, you know, the admission process to graduate school would be pretty easy and the students would all succeed. That's why we spend most of our time talking about a really holistic admissions process where we're trying to look at all the attributes that a student brings to the table. Their past experiences, why they want to go to graduate school, the contributions they're going to make to a graduate program. It's not an easy process to find that right person for graduate school, and we're looking for just all of those indicators. You know, the other point I'd like to make, and I think this is an important one, is there are a whole range of careers available to students who complete either a master's or a doctoral degree. Too often, we think the student that walks in the door at graduate school knows exactly what it is they're going to do when they walk out the door. And if it's a doctoral student, they're going to be a faculty member. And if it's a professionally oriented master's program, that's exactly the path they're going down. And nothing could be further from the truth. There's still an awful lot of learning going on with regard to what the career choices will be while students are in graduate school.
Thank you very much. Emily Haas, give us your parting comments as you head out there to Brown and on your way.
Okay, so I'm sure everyone's familiar with TED Talks, and one of my favorite TED Talk is by Simon Sinek, and he talks about the golden circle of leadership and how there's your why in the middle, and then your how, and then your what. And when I watched this in a class, it really transformed my life and the way I think through things. And I think today, a lot of what we've talked about relates to this concept in particular, because a lot of times the why students are in college is because they want to get a degree. And I think that as administrators and as faculty and staff and professors in these universities, it's to really tap into that why, because the why is what's motivating them, and it's what's keeping them there, and it's what's going to lead them to, whenever they leave and graduate, to get a job or to go to grad school. And so to remember how much of an impact you can have on them and how you can really transform that why, and you can help that relate to their passions by offering them a wide opportunity. I'll say the UNCG group who talked about that international marketing class, and that was an amazing opportunity. I want to go to UNCG to take that class. And so just thinking about all the different ways that you can channel another student's passion to be able to increase their involvement on campus, but then also to recognize their passion in regards to what they could do post-graduation. There just needs to be that one spark that gets them excited and kind of can transform their life. So just remember that that spark can be in your hands, and you can make that happen.
Kira Patel, you have a different perspective, a different experience on campus. Share some final thoughts, because it's you that I think you're what it's all, both of you are what it's all about. So share your thoughts with these folks. They can go out there and inspire their students.
Well, definitely what's stuck with me all day is that success is in the eye of the beholder. So there are just so many different levels to success, and that they're not all measured numerically. But then also finding your passion, and as different members of like faculty and staff at all these different schools, reaching out to these students and being that mentor in some way, whether it's just saying, hey, like, how's your classes going? Let's talk, let's get coffee, let's get lunch, and just being that support system for that student, because you don't know if they've got that support from anywhere else. And then also, we're here talking about student success, and I think it would be very important to have more students come in future years to share their stories of success and what success means for them, because we're getting a lot of perspective from the higher ups. But to have that student's perspective, I think would be very beneficial in future years.
And the perfect bridge to student affairs. Doctor, your final thoughts.
I would say that student success looks different for every student, so it's not the same, and that it's really a partnership with the student, with faculty and staff, and with the institution. If we all work collectively, then students can thrive within the institution.
Thank you. And final thoughts from the private sector.
All right, so one item, I probably should have answered this like at the first question. I'm just going to throw it out there real quick. As industry, we are constantly reminded that the people we're bringing in are millennials. And that term is, again, quite overused. But we are taught what millennials expect. What are millennials' buying habits? How do millennials like to be managed? I think the flip side is needed, that millennials need to be taught how to come into a company and work within a company. That they need to figure out how do they come in and add value, and that we have actually seen challenges with. So we see a lot of the training one way, and that training is to the existing industry, the people in it, versus the newer people coming in. So that's one of the soft skills, and I think from a teaming perspective, university students, they have great teams that are very cross-cultural, cross-gender, but they are not cross-generational. So that's the one aspect of teaming that I think needs to be enhanced from an academic perspective to ensure that you understand the different ways of thinking and based on literally the generations as to when we graduated or what our backgrounds were. So I think that's an area that I think is a needed skill somehow to be incorporated. But I think in closing, I guess what I would ask is that, as educators, that it's very easy to look at, did you solve the problem correctly? Did you get the right answer, yes or no? What I would ask is that you add another factor into that measurement in terms of how do you measure a soft skill. So if you're taking a thermodynamics course, how do you put in a soft skill activity that you can actually measure and grade? And that way you're reinforcing the need of that cross skill or that soft skill to the students. And the last item that I would ask for is to have more cross collaboration across the disciplines within the university. So if there's a way that you can blend some of your disciplines together, have your engineering and your marketing teams work together, have your finance teams work with the marketing teams, have some of that together, because in the real world, you're going to have to work across functions in a company. So I guess that's what I would leave you with as far as what would really benefit to see some students with experiences cross-functional or cross-discipline within the universities, as well as having some measures of their soft skills through their coursework.
Thank you very much. Hand for the panel. Very good discussion.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.